Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, November 20th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The game against Michigan is in 5 days. There is a little line movement on that game. Boy, is there a lot to talk about this week. We're going to start very briefly talking about a little change in the point spread for that game, maybe talk a little bit about what that means, and then answer a few of the questions we got from the absolute flood of questions that we got when Tony Gerdeman put out a call for listener questions in the middle of the Ohio State Minnesota game. Oh boy, do you guys have questions? We will do our very best to answer them. But Tony, I guess let's start with the movement on the line. Ohio State was a 5.5 point underdog a couple days ago. That line is sort of shrinking. Where is it now, and what do you think it might mean?
Yeah, right now it's a 3.5 as we talk and record this, and I wonder if it might continue to be bet down. I think it's a response to two things. Obviously, the lack of Jim Harbaugh on the sideline. You've seen that now the last 2 weeks, and things have been difficult for Michigan with Sherrone Moore as head coach. Now he's obviously 2-0, but their two closest games have been the last 2 weeks. Maybe a coincidence or maybe not a coincidence because it's been their two best opponents, I would say, as well. But also I think the performance against Maryland and the performance against Penn State has shown with some bounces in either of those games, there could have been a different outcome. There could have been a different victor, if you will. And so I think that has caught some eyes. So maybe, Tom, it's 1 point for the lack of Harbaugh. That's 1 point for the performance against Maryland, and that's how you have a line that drops 2 points in a couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, I think the quality of opposition is probably a good chunk of the difference in the last couple weeks in their performance. But yeah, it is. They have not looked quite as invincible the last two games against Penn State and Maryland as they have in the first 9. So we'll be talking more about that, I'm sure, a little later on this week. Something else we're going to be talking about a little later on this week on Tuesday night. If you are not familiar, we do a live episode on YouTube at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle during the college football playoff rankings update, not the selection show yet, the rankings update. We just started doing that a couple of years ago, and people really seem to like it, so we keep doing it. That'll be, I believe, 7 o'clock this week. I think we're done with the one stupid week where they do it at 9 p.m. So but in advance of that, there's always some kind of movement this time of year. Even if everyone wins, it feels like there's always something that shuffles around near the top of the polls. The first question that we got from JSpang37, Tony, will Michigan be replaced by Washington this week in the CFP rankings?
That would be a heck of a jump if they were, because Washington is number 5 right now. They got the nice win at Oregon State, and not great weather. Going on the road and winning up there is not easy. I don't think they jump Michigan. The question for me is, do they jump Florida State? Is this where the committee starts to move Florida State down because of the loss of Jordan Travis, even though they went ahead and thumped Northern Alabama? Is that who they were playing? North Alabama? And just obviously losing Jordan Travis is devastating. But I think, does the committee want to see them devastated on the field first? Like, do they need to see them lose before they move them? The committee has been using Washington's close wins against Stanford and Arizona State to hold them back. And I feel like this should trump, the win over Oregon State should trump that. So I do wonder if they jump Florida State. I don't see anybody jumping Michigan at this point. What about you?
I don't think anyone jumps Michigan, because I think the committee is going to kind of look at that and say, this is going to be a situation that's going to resolve itself one way or the other this weekend. Either Ohio State or Michigan is going to have a win, and then that team is quite possibly going to go to number 1. And then the team that loses the game is going to fall out of the top 4, certainly. And maybe it is just the top 4 if it's close, but I think you might see them fall behind Alabama too, potentially. And, again, there's the Washington and Oregon thing is going to resolve itself in another week in the Pac-12 championship game, unless Oregon State takes care of Oregon this week. So there's a lot of stuff that is going to change. I do think, who was the University of Cincinnati basketball player who broke his leg like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and right near the end of the season, their star player, and I'm just blanking on his name.
Was it Kenyon Martin?
It was Kenyon Martin. That's it. he broke his leg right before the tournament, and the committee moved Cincinnati down from a 1 seed to a 2 seed or whatever in recognition of the fact that they were not going to have their best player. The college football playoff committee has not yet, said that they're going to do anything like that with, Florida State without Jordan Travis. But that may sort of resolve itself because they do have to play Florida this week. Florida's not very good, but then they're going to have to play Louisville in the ACC championship game. And Louisville's good enough that they might just sort of resolve the Florida State situation for the committee. So, I honestly, this week, it honestly doesn't matter. Washington, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, those are situations they're going to resolve themselves. But I'm with you. I don't really expect a lot of movement there.
If Washington and Florida State both win out and they are 3-4, I would expect Washington's strength of schedule and strength of record to overtake them at some point.
Yeah, I would think so, because you're playing Washington would have, if Washington wins in the Pac-12 championship game, they will have either beaten Oregon State or Oregon, whoever wins the Civil War game this weekend. Oh, no, it would be Arizona. Sorry. I think Arizona would go if Oregon loses. But either way, you've got another good win. And, especially if it's Oregon, that's another top 5 win. And Florida State doesn't have, Louisville is 9th or something like that in the rankings currently. They're not, it would be a much better win for Washington than it would be for Florida State. And if Oregon wins out, then Oregon, I think, is broadly recognized as one of those teams you don't want to play. I think everyone right now is looking at Florida State and going, gimme, 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 in terms of who they could be paired up with in the college football playoff. I don't know that anyone wants Oregon in that same way. So if Oregon beats Washington, then they will have avenged their only loss. It's a better win than anything Florida State would have. So I am expecting whoever comes out of the Pac-12 to end up ahead of the ACC champion, whether that's Florida State or Louisville. Next one from @DeShakeItWatson. Need an update on Michael Hall.
Yeah, Ryan Day said after the game against Minnesota, he expects to have everybody back. And when he says everybody, like Mike Hall and anybody else who's a little bit banged up, Tommy Eichenberg obviously expects to have him back. But yeah, we had talked about the way that Ryan Day was not answering, or the way he was answering questions about Mike Hall, saying, I don't have an update on him. That's never a good sign. That's the language he used with Lathan Ransom, who was out for the regular season. That's language he's used in the past, where I don't have good news to give you, so I'm not going to give you any news. Or we're still waiting to see what the doctors say after whatever they're doing. So that was the language and the mood a week ago. But now after the Minnesota game and hearing some things, it sounds like he's going to be able to go. I don't know at what strength. And then Tom, even if he is able to go, is an 85% Mike Hall. And it's crazy to say this, is that somebody you want out there against Michigan's offensive line, that interior of the offensive line? Or would you prefer, they're going to go with Ty Hamilton a ton in that game at nose tackle. So then it becomes, Hero Canoe, Jaden McKenzie. Obviously, I think you'd rather go with Mike Hall over those guys if he's 85%. But how much can he go? What kind of situational situations do you put him in? That's all going to be figured out, I think, this week as they see him practice. But sounds like he's going to play.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like he's going to play. And with the way Michigan has lined up with 7 offensive linemen, you might need more than 4 defensive linemen at certain times. That may be something Ohio State looks at this week. So you may get more snaps for Mike Hall and everyone else just based on the fact you've got more linemen out there. We'll, I'm sure, take a deeper dive into that a little later on in the week. But yeah, it definitely does not seem like Mike Hall is definitely not going to play this weekend situation. He sounds like he's going to play, and it's more of a question of how much. I don't know that he was necessarily as much of a probably maybe could have played, but was being held out for more precautionary reasons as like a Tommy Eichenberg was on Saturday. But either way, he does sound like they are going to have pretty much everyone back other than Ransom for the Michigan game, which, that you would like to see both of these teams at full strength. You don't want a game of this magnitude with this much on the line to be settled by, an injury on either side. So it sounds like everyone is in relatively good shape, but we will try and fail to get updates on that from Jim Harbaugh and Ryan Day in the next couple days during their press conferences. Next one from at Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland spelled like Moses Cleveland with an A. I don't care how good Kyle McCord plays next week, as long as he doesn't turn it over. Do you think, Tony, do you agree that, I think job one is don't turn it over, but is this the list is don't turn it over and there is no job two, or does he need to do a little more than that?
No, I think he needs to do a little more than that. It's do your job and also don't turn it over. And I'm just looking through the past turnover margins of Michigan games, and you have to go back to like 2009 when it was more than a +2 or -2 for Ohio State. And last year it was -2 with a pair of interceptions. 2021, when Ohio State lost the game again, they were actually +1 in there, getting an interception from, I believe, Cade McNamara. But I think you can have a quarterback that plays well. And we've seen Kyle McCord throw some interceptions in games this year, and obviously the Ohio State has still won. I think if he's if you get a consistent Kyle McCord out in that game, you can afford an interception if they're scoring and moving the ball and on other drives. If you're not getting a consistent Kyle McCord and he doesn't throw any interceptions, that just may mean he's not accurate enough to throw to the defense. They need to be moving the ball. They need to be picking up third downs, need to keep Michigan's offense off the field when you can. So I think, honestly, I think you can afford an interception as long as he's doing everything else and moving the ball. And because if he's doing everything else and moving the ball, you're also running the ball probably. And if he is, if he played like he did against Minnesota, where he's 20 of 30 for 210 yards and 2 touchdowns, but also an interception, I don't think that's a losing number. It may not be a winning number, but I think I would rather take that than, 12 for 25 with 160 yards and no interceptions, because that doesn't move the ball. That's not keeping staying on ahead of the chains. That's not being productive. So I think you can be productive and still give one away, but try not to give 2 away.
I'm with you on, 20 for 30 for 215 yards, whatever it was, and a couple touchdowns. I think that might be, if you tell me that is Kyle McCord's exact stat line, I think I'm probably picking Ohio State to win that game. It's not a guarantee that they win that game, but, they're going to be able to run the ball some. This is not, they're not going to do the Maryland thing where they're averaging about 17 inches per rush. They'll be better than that. And maybe you hit a big one, but with as low scoring as this game is, if you tell me that Kyle McCord throws 2 touchdowns, has no interceptions, I would really love for you to tell me he does not have a fumble. That would help move the needle in terms of the likelihood of an Ohio State win one way or another. But it feels like that feels like a winning performance to me. And if JJ McCarthy puts up that line, that's almost certainly a winning performance to me. Because if they have 2 touchdowns through the air, you figure Blake Corum gets 1 on the ground from 2 yards out at some point. If you get into the low to mid 20s, it feels like whoever gets to 24, 27 points probably winning this game. And so I would say if 20 for 30, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, that is probably a winning stat line for Kyle McCord, and likely a winning stat line, or very likely a winning stat line for JJ McCarthy. Any disagreement there? No,
you don't have to be fantastic in this game. Just be good enough to keep the ball moving and just be productive.
All right. Last one from Matt Moo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hey, that's a combination of my luggage. Remind all those Michigan fans to save those 1,000 win signs. They may need to reuse them.
Tom, I did see Blake Corum after the game was asked about the 1,000 wins and said something to the effect of, that'll last forever. Something they can't take away from you. Something to that effect. And I was like, I don't know that that's actually true. That is something that may not last forever. And it may be something that they can take away from you. So yes, save the signs. Are these like broken clock signs, basically, that, twice a year, twice a decade, it'll be correct. Save them and use them again. And hey, maybe it's just becomes a tradition. Like every 7 years, you break those signs out.
I'm reminded of the great Norm Macdonald at the ESPYs, where he introduced Michigan legend Charles Woodson in the 1998 ESPYs, I believe it would have been, and said, you won the Heisman Trophy. That's something no one can ever take away from you, unless, of course, you kill your wife and a waiter. And the gasps in the room were audible. Ken Griffey Jr. with one of the all-time great reactions. Go find that video. It is tremendous. But you got to remember, O.J. Simpson is not the only USC running back to have had his Heisman Trophy taken away. Tony, who took away Reggie Bush's Heisman Trophy?
Well, the Heisman Trust.
Well, yes. Okay. Who inspired the Heisman Trust? Don't be pedantic with me, sir.
The NCAA's rulings against many, many things, including the leasing of a house, perhaps for the Bush family by some boosters, I believe.
So, yes. So it would not be unprecedented for a milestone to be achieved and then rescinded. That's next year us's problem. Next year us's conversation. We're not there yet. We got plenty of stuff to talk about this week as the Buckeyes and Wolverines kick off Saturday at noon in the Big House in Ann Arbor. We will be there. The plan is we're going to be up in Ann Arbor on Monday as well. Jim Harbaugh has his press conference at noon. We will be, if the good Lord be a willing and the creek don't rise, we will be up there for that press conference. We'll have interviews with Michigan players and head coach Jim Harbaugh. We're going to try and do a live show. We can't guarantee any of this. Anytime you're on the road and Kevin's not there to run operations for us, things can get a little dicey. But we are going to be up there, have coverage of that for you. And then Tuesday, Ryan Day's press conference and Jim Knowles and some of the Buckeye players. Lots to talk about with those guys as well. Should be a busy couple days. Boy, busy couple weeks. It's going to feel like a couple weeks this week. But there's going to be a lot to talk about. And a great place to talk about all of it is at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That is where Tony and I make our internet home, along with Kevin Noon covering the team, Mark Givler covering Ohio State recruiting, Ross and Devin and Mickey covering X's and O's, making you a smarter football fan, and of course, a very active and energetic community on the Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So if you have been thinking, maybe I will take the leap and try one of these sites, this would be a great time to do it. Try it for 30 days. Give me a lot to talk about this week, potentially a lot to talk about next week, heading into the Big Ten championship game or heading into a time of uncertainty and tumult. We don't know which one it's going to be yet. We will find out Saturday at about 3:30 p.m. But there's going to be a lot on the line this week. There's a lot on the line in the next month, and potential national championship hopes for either Ohio State or Michigan, or potentially both, I guess, theoretically. So give us a chance. Give us a try at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Lots of interesting stuff to talk about there all week, all month, and all year long. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.